Story 1. There have been a few times I thought the nanny state was infringing too far. For example, Democrats in New York once wanted to limit soda cup sizes in restaurants and convenience stores. I am fine with the warning labels, as soda really is poison, but adult humans should be allowed to drink poison if they choose. Also, the Paul father-son duo were the loudest opposition to the rapidly growing police and surveillance state after September 11th. Giving Rand credit for anything is making me queasy. Story 2. I believe in the Second Amendment specifically for home defense. I also disagree with the counterargument that it is dangerous to the homeowner, as that is my decision to make as the homeowner. I also disagree with the left's focus on saying what is right versus doing what is right. You can agree with someone on the left, but if you say homeless instead of unhoused, that is all they focus on. Story 3. I do not have an opposing political platform. Politics is not a team sport. While I might support one party in this election, they do not retain my support, and I will switch to who best aligns with my beliefs at the time. My core beliefs. Government should facilitate society to improve lives for the majority. Government should provide regulations and safeguards to prevent exploitation. People should have freedoms of expression and opportunities. The most marginalized should have additional safety nets to enable participation. Healthcare, education, clean water, and shelter should be human rights, not profit centers. Story 4. This is hard to answer because my political opposition says they believe many things but then proves they do not actually care about them. For example, they say they are against high taxes but vote for a man whose campaign promises the largest tax increase on the working class in American history. Ultimately, I have to say they do not have any beliefs I agree with because it does not seem like they have any beliefs at all. Story 5. Liberals generally support leaving people alone. I wish the Republican Party would do the same and reduce morality-based lawmaking. To be clear, I barely support the Republican Party. Both parties have significant flaws. Story 6. In theory, fiscal responsibility and reducing debt. In practice, Republicans have increased most of the debt through unfunded tax cuts. Most of the rest of their platform includes undercutting education, harming immigrants and people of color, opposing LGBTQ people, promoting Christian nationalism, neglecting the environment, providing huge giveaways to large corporations and billionaires, undermining democracy, restricting women's health rights, violating workers' rights and organized labor, privatizing healthcare for profit, and other deplorable actions. Story 7. I am on the left, but I am okay with not allowing immigration from Muslim-majority countries. We already have too many religious conservatives in this country. We do not need to import more. Story 8. I'm pretty liberal on everything, and when I say liberal, I do not mean progressive or Democrat, even though they do espouse some liberal views and generally I vote Democrat. I would say my political leanings are 90% liberal, 5% communist, and 5% conservative. I am also very pro-gun. I grew up in a small conservative Christian town. My family was a mixture of conservative and liberal ideas and beliefs. I believe gun ownership is an inherent right, and it has been repeatedly upheld in the Supreme Court, even though now the Supreme Court is just a rubber stamp for Donald Trump. Some of my other conservative views regard free speech, though historically these have been liberal. Banning speech because you consider it hateful is a slippery slope because hate speech is interpreted differently by each person. I do not agree with homophobia, transphobia, racism, or sexism, but it is still speech. The Supreme Court case of Skokie versus the National Socialist Party of America deemed that speech or demonstrations that espouse these views are still considered an exercise of the First Amendment. Story 9. It is difficult to know what the Republican Party actually believes anymore. That started with Ronald Reagan, who said he was against having a federal deficit, then created the largest deficit in American history up to that point in time. Story 10. That pornography should be restricted more or outright banned. Too many people have no concept of how real relationships work anymore. Story 11. Well, for one, it is not a binary. Some parties I agree with more, some I disagree with more, but even then my general beliefs tend to place me down the middle more often than not. Story 12. I do not vote until a candidate shares most of my values with few faults. I am voting based on my values, not for a single issue on either side of the aisle. Story 13. Abortion is a complex issue. I have talked to many pro-life conservatives, and most are okay with first-trimester abortions without questions, abortions in cases of rape, and when the mother's life is at risk. This position aligns with the laws in most Republican states. The issue is that Republicans often view pro-choice as supporting late-term abortions without reason, so they do not identify as pro-choice. Story 14. School lunch programs. Marriage equality. Rehabilitation programs for some individuals re-entering society after incarceration. Story 15. As a pro-lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer or questioning, intersex, asexual and other identities, AR-15 rifle owning, diesel vehicle driving, recreational marijuana and universal healthcare supporting, environmentally conscious, religious freedom supporting, science-believing man whose primary objective in life is to create a world where my child does not have to follow in my footsteps by getting stuck in a career they hate because it is the only way they can support their family. There simply is no political platform in the United States that I am able to align myself with. Story 16. I agree with many complaints from everyone. The problem is I do not agree with any platform to address nearly anything. One of the major components to solving our national debt would require both an increase in tax income and a decrease in spending. With skill implemented in good faith, we could invest in GDP growth to serve the same goal while lessening the pain for the average citizen. No one is offering to do this. Immigration has been problematic since at least the 1900s. However, neither just funding it more nor making it a circus and advertising how dangerous it is to come here are useful responses to reality. Our demographics require immigration just to stabilize the job market and all its effects, until at least 2035 to support the structure of our economy as baby boomers age out quicker than they are replaced. There has been no suggestion for a platform to identify exactly what we want, in what amount, over what time, and how we go about integration, anything useful to tackle the systemic cancer at all. So what I am getting at is I do not have a side. They are all like the rent is too damn high guy with the same number of viable solutions to systemic issues. One just disgusts me more than the other. Story 17. I'm big on a clean slate for criminals who have proven they will not reoffend. This is interesting because when I mention it to people in my party, it surprises them since I am strongly in favor of harsh criminal punishment initially. What I mean is if you commit a crime, especially a violent or sexual crime, or are a repeat offender, I want the law to pursue you fully and bring you to justice. However, once you are released, I believe that if you can go 5 years without reoffending, your records should be sealed from employers, and you should have your rights restored, especially the right to vote, without questions. Of course, there should be reasonable exceptions, such as someone who has a history involving children having that revealed if they apply to work at a school, or someone involved in a road rage incident who chased another person into traffic with a weapon having that show up if they try to purchase a firearm. The problem is that the law often works the opposite way, taking a long time to arrest people committing crimes, and once arrested, the records haunt them forever, preventing employment and voting. This means they have little choice but to return to crime for support since society already labels them as criminals. For example, my state has a significant domestic violence problem. I have seen too many cases where men get drunk or high and attack their wives and children, and the state does almost nothing. They may be jailed overnight, but if charges are pressed, which is rare, the district attorney often offers a deal to avoid jail if the person pleads guilty. I have seen men receive more than 30 deferred dispositions. The purpose of a deferred disposition is to give someone a second chance when it is believed they will not reoffend and have otherwise been law-abiding citizens who made one mistake. But if they offend again, they face severe consequences. These men continue to terrorize their families and receive deferred dispositions for years until tragedies occur, such as killing their spouses. Then authorities express regret as if nothing could have been done, ignoring that keeping them jailed might have prevented the outcome, and those who allowed their release bear responsibility. In some cases, the spouse or more likely their child becomes fed up and harms the abuser in self-defense. That child then faces a lifetime of being labeled a murderer, losing employment opportunities, voting rights, and firearm ownership. They often must turn to crime to support themselves after release, all because they were protecting themselves and their parent. That child, in my opinion, deserves a chance to prove that if they can remain free of reoffending, they should have a shot at a normal life. Story 18. I am a Democrat who leans conservative on fiscal issues and is generally against gun control and in favor of broad self-defense rights. The difficulty is that it is not clear to me how much the Republican Party consistently believes in any of that. In general, I lean small L libertarian, but the Republican Party most definitely does not. For example, some people would say my hardline pro-free speech stance is right-wing, but data points show that support for state censorship is rampant on both the left and right, and support for state censorship is higher on the right than on the left. Story 19. It depends on whether you mean what the opposing political platform claims to embrace or what they actually support. The Democratic Party has many ideas they claim to care about that I agree with, and I would certainly vote for them if they followed through on their promises competently. However, the Democratic Party has repeatedly failed to choose competent candidates and does not seem interested in fulfilling their claims. Story 20. I am generally liberal, but I do support the more Republican focus on reducing the deficit and balancing the budget. I say supposedly because of what literally just happened. To be honest, this has been an issue from both sides of the aisle for a long time now. Story 21. I support the death penalty in theory but not in practice because errors occur, and it is more expensive to execute someone than to give them a life sentence. Story 22. I cannot answer this in good conscience because I cannot determine what the opposing political platform is. There are stated positions I approve of and disapprove of on both sides, but the side I tend to disagree with more acts contrary to the positions they claim to hold, which I would otherwise agree with. Story 23. Corporations want to disarm the working class, and they have convinced Democrats that disarming the working class is a smart idea. It is not a smart idea. It is very unwise. There were no leftist or progressive thinkers before 1980 who ever advocated for disarming the working class or centralizing gun ownership to the police. Democrat voters who agree with disarming the working class are influenced by corporate interests, and their egos prevent them from seeing this. There is a reason why the right to bear arms is closely connected to the right to free speech. When speech fails, good people may need to use force. Democrats act as if we are in a musical where bad guys are easily defeated and everything turns out well. That is not how progress happens. Supporting bad actors is harmful. Stop doing it. I stand firm on this issue. Keep your hands off my rights. Focus instead on corporate wrongdoing, which is what is truly harming this nation and our planet, not individuals who enjoy responsible shooting activities. Story 24. As a left-handed person, I was shocked at how out of control the immigration leniencies were in the European Union around 2015. It was disturbing. Story 25. United States Democratic and Republican viewpoints on tariffs and isolationism. I believe economically we and the world would be better off if we tried being as mercantile as possible at a local level so that we can benefit the most from local industry. Despite many Democrats being socialists, not many people acknowledge that some goods need to be more expensive in order for wages to increase. To stay competitive, foreign goods also need to be expensive. Story 26. What is an opposing political platform? Do you mean opposing political party? I have yet to find a political platform that I entirely oppose or entirely embrace. That is kind of what it means to be an independent voter. I support things I believe will achieve goals, not as a prerequisite of membership to a group. I support strong borders and clear immigration processes. I do not support criminalizing immigrants who have been here for years without issue or who violate administrative rules like traffic citations or laws like loitering. I do not like watching federal arrests that are indistinguishable from cartel kidnappings. I support strong prosecution for fraud. I applaud the recent prosecutions of health providers who have been defrauding Medicaid, likely for decades. I do not like seeing felons pardoned because they are wealthy enough to give politicians money. I do not like seeing violent criminals pardoned because their violence was in the name of the prevailing party. I support the courts. I do not like it when people thumb their noses at judicial orders or employ smear campaigns against those we ask to decide truth just because they do not agree with the outcomes. I do not think that children should be allowed to choose life-altering surgery without the consent of their parents. I do think adults and parents should have the right to make those choices, however. I also recognize that mothers take their sons into women's restrooms, and fathers bring their daughters into men's restrooms from time to time, and have for a very long time without any real issues. Depriving rights over theoreticals is not my preference. I could probably go on, but instead I will just say that from the outside this looks like two factions hellbent on annihilating the other. We seem to make decisions not on what will be best for the 340 million Americans, but on what will do the most damage to the 250 million who did not vote for our side. Story 27. I have to go back in time to when the Republican Party at least said it was in favor of a balanced federal budget. I think deficit spending is necessary in recessions and special periods, for example, the COVID-19 pandemic, but when the economy is doing well, the budget should be balanced or, ideally, running a small surplus to begin to reduce the public debt. Today, neither party seems concerned that interest payments on the debt are roughly equal to defense spending. Story 28. I agree with the Republican Party that Iran probably should not have a nuclear bomb, but that is about all I can think of. Story 29. Here is where I want to be. We do not vote on candidates. We vote on policies. Bills must be 300 words or less. No more than 6 bills per year. We vote annually on those bills, not Congress, not the Senate. Voters. During the annual voting day, there is a multiple choice question. What issues would you like to see addressed in the next voting cycle? The issues with the most votes are discussed by the Senate and the House, and a bill is written. The bills are designed as option A or B or C. For example, here are 2 proposed immigration bills. Which one do you vote for? If you do not like either, vote option C. If C wins, the bill needs to be rewritten. Every vote counts. More power is given to states, less power to the nation. If Mississippi wants to outlaw reading and force people to go to church, so be it. But no state can prevent people from going to other states or control their actions in those other states. Wherever you are obligated to follow the laws of the land. Lastly, a flat tax. Every single purchase is taxed at the same rate. No Internal Revenue Service, no tax-free exemptions, no tax season, no special deals. Everyone and every business pays the same on everything. Neither side is saying anything close to what I am looking for. It is all billionaires stealing from us legally. Story 30. Theoretically, I agree with harsher responses to serious crimes, such as cleaning up cartels and gangs. If I were in charge, my methods would make their seem tame in comparison. However, I do not support accomplishing this by bypassing due process and checks and balances. That is worse than not doing it at all. Story 31. That would require the grand old party to have any principles beyond bigotry and personal greed. If they have ever believed in anything else, and it was not just an act to get them to this point, they certainly do not anymore. Story 32. Is there any belief among conservatives, other than suffering for those the leader says should suffer? Please point me toward any belief that conservatives would be willing to stand up for to defend. Edit to add. Those downvoting without saying what conservatives believe that they will not change their minds about at the whim of their leader are cowards. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.